Welcome, we're Bereans at the Gate. We are back with our video blog. It's been how many months, gentlemen, since we've done this? 4 or 5, whatever, something like that?
April or May, yeah.
Our dozens of fans are demanding a new video blog, and we're here to, to sort of appease them. So welcome, it's good to be here. We are in a better situation by an order of magnitude compared to last time we did this. Last time it was in the conference room next to my office, a little bit of cramped quarters, a little bit of sort of interesting, me editing and other things. This is a different scenario altogether. So thanks to Cedarville University, of course, our employer, for putting this together. Thanks everyone in the studio who's helping us out. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we can live up to the digs in which we find ourselves at the moment. I don't know. So anyway, I'm Mark Caleb Smith. You guys want to introduce yourself? Because we're going to do this. We're going to do podcasting with this and all kinds of other stuff. So I'm Mark Caleb Smith, History and Government Department here at Cedarville.
Bert Wheeler, I'm an economist here at Cedarville.
Jeff Heyman, I teach economics as well in the School of Business Administration.
I'm Mark Clausen, I'm also in the Department of History and Government at Cedarville.
All right, very good. So we're going to kick around a few topics today, mostly things related to current events, of course. I think we have to talk about Donald Trump and DACA. What in the world's going on? Donald Trump's having dinner with Democrats and negotiating side deals, it seems, at some level. Mark, do you want to tell us, first of all, what is DACA? And then what's Trump doing in relation to it? Let's start there.
DACA is deferred action for children who are, I never get the acronym exactly
Childhood
right.
arrivals.
Childhood arrivals,
Childhood
yeah.
arrivals,
Deferred action for childhood arrivals. Yeah. And it's for a certain age group of children who came at an earlier date and who are now older children, obviously, maybe not even children. But we have about 800,000 of them fall into this program. It's been running since 2012. It was Obama initiated by executive order. There's question about whether it's actually constitutional. Donald Trump recently decided he was going to rescind it, but he gave a 6-month window for Congress to take action. That's where we are right now.
Jeff, what do you think about Trump talking with Democrats about, he had a dinner with Pelosi and Schumer. They sort of kicked around this idea. Seemingly Trump now wants to enshrine DACA into law, which is interesting, I think, for people who supported him in the general election. But what do you think about him dealing with Democrats?
I think he should deal with whoever it makes sense can do the right thing. So I don't have any particular problem with him dealing with Democrats. The question is, what is the right thing in this particular situation, and what should happen? So I think pretty much, I think one of the things you're talking about, the people that support him, there's a wide variety of people
Absolutely.
that did support him.
Yep.
And the legist results I saw, for instance, on this particular issue said that something like 87% of the people that were voted for Trump would be in favor of extending a legalization to these kids. So I don't think that we'll get him in trouble. The questions that we're seeing abound on this issue are more on the lines of, is he getting enough back from the Democrats in negotiating, or is he giving away the store, in effect, in negotiations? So I've seen some of that press.
Yeah, I mean, Bert, we sort of thought of Donald Trump, or he cast himself, let's say, as this master negotiator. This man who can come in, whip up a deal, walk out with his own interests in mind. I mean, so far in the Trump presidency, have you seen that? Is that Donald
of course,
Trump?
we haven't seen anything resembling someone that can negotiate. And I'm not sure if it wasn't a big fiction to begin with, even in terms of his business and what he did, during his reign over Trump's. I won't call it an empire. I don't know if it's exactly correct, but
The Trump empire.
I'm not sure if the situation he was in, if he really needed to negotiate then. I mean, he did write a book where he claimed, to be a great negotiator. He has proved exceptionally inept in the political arena. I don't, when I look at what he did, I don't even see him ever as being a Republican. To me, he was much more back his older self, Democrat. So for him to like Schumer and do work with Schumer does not surprise me at all. What he did on this does not surprise me, and with my particular inclinations on the subject, I'm rather happy that he did this. So
Happy that he dealt with the Democrats to do it, or happy that he's heading in this direction?
I'm happy that he is heading in this direction with this particular group of individuals, and I think what we're going to see is a rebirth of the Dreamer legislation that has failed numerous times. Most recently, I believe, was 2010. I think that's where we're going to go.
I mean, Jeff, you said that there's polling that suggests this is actually relatively popular if the president proceeds in this direction. I guess my concern would be, is the hardcore of Trump's base that part that would be most offended by it? Because you could argue that maybe, the Ann Coulters and other people of the world who really saw this as the fundamental issue, and now they're seeing him perhaps head the other direction? Is this going to really isolate him from the base of people that brought him into office?
Sure.
Yeah.
And Coulter today said he should be impeached. So.
Yeah, that's right. She said, "What did she say? Who doesn't want to
Who
impeach
doesn't
him
want
now?"
to impeach
Yeah,
him?
which is really interesting.
If you're going to find offended people, you're going to find them in his base. I think the 87% number is pretty telling. That most people do want to grandfather those people in.
Sure.
But I don't know what they want to do going forward. That's another issue. Do we want to continue the program going forward anyway? That's a whole different issue. I would say no, 87% would not say that.
Well, when you say going, what do you mean going forward?
I mean,
just the
continue to
dreamer
implement
part
the
of it?
program, yeah, in such a way that you would continue to allow these people,
Yeah.
these children to come in.
Yeah.
I would say most people probably would not favor continuation, but just these 800,000, let's let them stay, but let's deal strictly with immigration after this and make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Now, when you're saying most people, to whom are you referring?
A
Where do
majority
you come at?
of the
And
total
what-
population.
And why would you think that?
Based on what I've seen, essentially, not from just the base, but from people in general out there, surveys that have been done.
I think if you're talking about reformation of our immigration policy right now, I would agree that most individuals, most people, I think, would want to see some changes. Given that it's been very difficult to try to even talk about this subject, it's so hot right now. I think to take it piecemeal is not a bad way to go about doing it as long as we continue. I mean, I think there has to be much more than this, but I don't think that you're going to have too many people that would want children separated from their parents, or however we would put it, in the future.
Oh, no, I don't disagree
Right.
with that. I'm thinking there's going to be a more comprehensive approach to it and say, we want to keep everyone out that we don't want in, right? We want to keep illegal immigration minimized so that we don't have to worry about the childhood problem at all, or more or less, not much.
Right.
After that.
I mean, I agree with almost all of what you guys have said, but think back to when Trump announced as a candidate. He descended from the golden escalator, made a speech where he was really harsh on Mexican immigrants in particular. I think it's fair to say this issue defined his candidacy to some extent. His rigidity on immigration defined his candidacy to a great extent. So far, he looks like an elite. He looks like the rest of our elites do as it relates to immigration. Now, we could argue about whether that's good or bad, whether you agree with him or disagree with him, but there's no draining of any swamp. There's no hardcore attitude that he's taking on this issue. Yeah, and so it just seems like it's really disconnected him from even his own rhetoric, which, you know, Bert's point basically is his rhetoric doesn't mean all that much in some ways. I mean, what do you think?
Two things.
Go ahead.
One, he became president.
Yeah.
And he came face to face with some realities that he didn't know about beforehand. Political realities.
That's a gracious interpretation, but let's go with it.
Let's go with that for now.
Let's go with it.
Secondly, Bert, I think, was implying at least that he's a pragmatist. And he's looking for policies that will help him establish himself, his overall agenda, and his legacy for the future. And if it means cooperating with certain kinds of people, he'll do it. It's not going to be that way across the board on every policy, but he's going to look for supporters everywhere he goes. If it means Republicans, if it means Democrats, or a combination of the two.
When you say pragmatist, that to me, that's even being charitable. I don't see any intellectual or ideological core at all.
Well, pragmatism doesn't have to be smart.
Well, but when you say pragmatism, you might be talking about a methodology or a way to go about achieving something. And I don't think he really has anything in mind to achieve.
Oh, I think he does.
Wow.
I guess that's the question. I mean, Jeff, what do you think? What do you think would be the core of what Trump wants to do?
If you wanted to give the best case for Mr. Trump right now, and I would share some of your misgivings, but you could say, look, it's not defensible to try and say we're going to go after the 800,000 kids.
Right.
Let's get that off the table and fight harder for maybe some of these other aspects later on.
Yeah.
Part of the criticisms, of course, right now on that is he didn't get much in this deal with the Democrats, leading towards some other eventual goal.
Right. Yep.
Now, you know, he could be more strategic than we give him credit. I mean, the very fact that he went to the Democrats may put more pressure on Republicans in other issues. Maybe he's playing some strategic game that we don't see.
Maybe
That's
now.
charitable. You know, I don't know. We don't see that.
In the absence of other information, though, it's probably the proper approach.
Pretty skeptical.
I mean, we got to move on. We can talk the whole time about just this issue, but it's fascinating that the president is already turning toward Democrats in a very significant way. In another way, though, I can see why. I mean, he had the Obamacare sort of blow up in his face due to Republicans. John McCain's the one who brought about that to some extent. why would he think the Republicans are going to do better on this issue? So why not turn to Democrats? You know, whether you like Trump or dislike him, it's not an irrational strategy.
I don't think this can hurt him. I really don't think this is going to hurt him.
Bert looks like he's dying to say something.
I don't think there's any strategy there. That's what I don't think. I think it's a blow in the wind kind of thing. And whoever has his ear at that particular time is going to be able to control the tweets a little bit. That's what I'm saying is I don't see anything ideological in what he's doing.
Oh, not ideological. No, pragmatic.
But I think
pragmatic only to get a win. It doesn't matter if the win is left, right, center, or backwards.
But the win does relate to his agenda. His agenda, part of his agenda was to make America great, which implies this immigration issue too. Nah. I'm not saying this is right. I'm just saying this is.
I'm so glad you're moving us on.
Yeah, let's move on. Speaking of Donald Trump, he became president last November. Obviously, that meant Hillary Clinton did not. Hillary Clinton recently has released a book. What happened? You know, one wag said it's the only book cover where you see the question and the answer all together, which I think is kind of funny. But Hillary's been on her sort of tour of talking about this book and what might have taken place. Do you guys have any impressions generally about the tour? Let's start there. Is this good for the country? Let's start there. With the losing candidate to be so out front so quickly, talking about this election like she is.
I think it's harmful to the Democrats. So that's
agreed.
Wherever that fits in, whether that's good for the country or not is a different story. But I don't think it does the Democrats any good, which is why I think she's getting panned by a number of progressive critics.
Yeah.
So
why won't she just go away?
Yeah, that's what they
the
want
limelight?
to do.
So she's hurting potential candidates for the future.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And making Democrats look bad in general. And there was a song back in the 70s or 80s, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. Well, this is 50 ways to explain your loss, right? At least 50. Yeah. I don't know how many there are.
Didn't know we have any Simon and Garfunkel references. Paul Simon, sorry. Paul Simon. So that's good for current music references, Dr. Clausen. So it's very
Let me throw this out. Yeah. This is what I think is happening. I look at both parties. And we're talking about this in the context in terms of as if we still had political parties the way we've conventionally thought of them. I think that this points to how fragmented the Democrats are, and they're just a complete mess.
They are.
And also I think the same thing's true with the Republicans.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if the Republicans even exist as a group, only in name only. We're just simply too fragmented.
Yeah.
I take a different take than that because I think that the Democratic Party was, with the Obama administration, systematically kind of rooted out any of the possibility of centrists within, such that there are no rising stars. We saw that in the very presidential race. Who was going to rise up? You had very elderly candidates. Right. And who are the young up-and-comers? And the only young up-and-comers you have are at the very far left of the screen. So that makes them very, very much unable to get past a general election, in my mind. So Hillary running again, continue to push the left. We'll talk more about maybe Mr. Sanders' Medicare for all. That's that. Right. All these things continue what I see for the Democrats. They're going still further left. They are so angry at the Trump election, and they're taking the party even further left, not to the center. So that's the real conflict. The Republicans, on the other hand, whatever you think, and many of us still wonder, how did Mr. Trump become the nominee? Sure. But prior to the race starting, we looked at the people that were running, and there were quite a number of what were considered a priori, before the fact, very strong candidates relative to history. We didn't have John McCain. We didn't have many of the others that were there. Such that, and you look at all the governorships the Republicans have, so forth, they have a much broader ground base to draw from than I believe the Democrats do. Their strength in the Democrat side is only on the very far extreme, whereas Republicans have more of a base. Now, somebody's going to have to rise up from that, but I'm not.
I can see both of you having a point here, right? I do think that the Democratic Party at the top has tried to push everyone toward the left, in general, as Jeff said. In doing that, though, not everyone has gone with them yet. And not everyone
within their own party, or
with their own party.
Okay.
Yeah, and they may not all go. So there's still splitting. There's still a split within the party. The question is, how long will that split last, or whether they'll become a smaller but more unified party, or whether they'll continue to be a disunified party. The whole issue about abortion was one of those, where the leadership said, if you're anti-abortion or pro-life, we don't really want you. Right? A clear statement at the top of the leadership.
I mean, I think there's a split, but I don't see the split at the elite level. The elite level just seems to be
I agree.
gravitating hard toward the left.
They're left.
And the only split there is, are we far left enough?
Yes.
I mean, we're talking about difference between socialists and social democrats.
Can we go any further?
And that's
Yeah.
that's the extent of the split, I think.
Yeah.
Now, there are some centrist Democrats, but they're not in leadership positions.
No.
They're not in positions to
Marginalized,
exercise influence on the party.
And they
Republicans
become-
aren't much better shape, though. I think that's probably fair to say. Which is odd when they control all three branches of government ostensibly, control most of the governor's mansions in the country.
Yeah.
They still don't appear to be a
Yeah.
strong party
No.
in some ways.
But let's give them this. If they're able to pull off one major success, say tax reform,
Yeah.
or Obamacare ACA repeal in
Right.
place, I think the trend would be much stronger in favor of the Republicans. They've got to deliver, though. If they
Yeah.
do not deliver, they go into this next election cycle with nothing accomplished. It's going to be very hard for them to make gains.
Yep.
Their best fortune, of course, is the Democrats are in, I believe, further disarray. But
Yeah.
Now, real quickly, before we move on to the next issue, you guys tell me in a sentence why you think Hillary did lose. I mean, what do you think is the best explanation? That's probably unfair given the complexity of it. If you had to boil it down, what would you boil it down to? Let's start with Mark.
Completely out of touch.
She was out of touch?
Yes.
And you think that cost her?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Jeff, what do you think?
I think she's the most unelectable candidate ever. I mean, her corruption was what led people to be against her.
All right. Bert?
And I'll just pile on and say just her personality is very difficult to like.
Yeah.
And so I think it was just her particularly.
Yeah.
Could have had almost any other person there, I think, and they would have fared better. Whether they would have won or not, I'm not certain, but
Right.
they certainly would have fared better.
Yeah, as far as I know, the only people that really robustly predicted a Trump victory were political scientists who looked at broader models, who said the cycle should just yield a Republican, no matter who it was. Somehow Trump
We
managed
had
to
Professor
be that.
Heyman here predicted it. but-
Yeah, it's fascinating. All right, let's keep
Yeah.
moving here. We generally focus in the Trump presidency, maybe for good or for ill, on disruption. In some ways, bad news, division, controversy. But you could argue the Trump administration has achieved some victories, especially when it comes to bureaucratic Washington, D.C. There's this movement to sort of push back against the bureaucracies in D.C., to sort of scale down big government as we know it. Do you think the Trump administration's been successful on that front? I mean, Bert, what do you think?
I think in some senses, of course, I do. If you look at what's going on at the EPA, I mean, there are some things happening there that are pushing back regulations. Some
So
of
for our listeners, what's the EPA?
Environmental
Our viewers?
Environmental Protection Association.
All right, and
or
what do
agencies,
they do? They regulate the environment,
Well, I
obviously.
think primarily regulating pollution. This is primarily
Yeah,
what
that's
I
probably
think
right.
about.
That's right. And so what kind of
Clean
things
air,
are they
clean
doing in
water.
the EPA that have sort of pushed back in that area?
Well, they are not enforcing some of the regulations that were enforced. I mean, there are things regarding effluents into streams. And someone else help me out here, give me some more detail.
The groundwater regulation that was supposed to regulate
yeah.
almost every pond in the United States at one point is being rescinded.
Yeah.
And every little rain puddle could become
Yeah.
a wetland
Yeah.
under the,
Right.
the pre-existing.
That's a big
rules.
one. Some of the emissions regulations are being looked at seriously, and some have been rescinded already even. Some of the more onerous
Some
ones.
people from a different perspective might hear what you guys have just said and so say, oh, great, a Republican's going to pollute the environment.
Ah,
Now, I'm not saying that's a fair
Yeah,
charge,
sure,
but do you
right.
think that's how do we deal with sort of
Yeah.
the environmental argument that the EPA is really being dismantled and we're going to see environmental consequences because of it?
this is the typical charge made against Republicans by Democrats every time that they want to roll back regulations. But the problem you have to understand is that for every extra regulation beyond what gives us a genuine benefit, it costs us a lot of money with either no benefit or such a tiny benefit, it doesn't make any difference.
Not worth the cost.
So it's not worth the cost to do it. But the Democrats won't let people think long enough to think through that, right? Unfortunately.
Sometimes the regulations have unintended consequences. Dr. Wheeler and I were at a conference about 3 or 4 years ago where one of the AEI scholars outlined the governor's proposal on I think 20% or 25% of all the California's energy had to be from renewables by 2020. I could have slight numbers wrong here. But the point that the scholar made was that requirement meant that they had to have a number of sources up which would be inefficient to provide continual electricity, i.e. it doesn't always, even in California, have sunshine, and the wind doesn't always blow. That necessitated that they keep the existing coal-fired generators and gas generators online, but they would dial those down during the peak times when solar and everything else was up. Well, the problem from an engineering standpoint is it's better for those plants to run at 99% efficiency all the time. It actually led to a higher level of carbon output, but you had 25% renewables.
And they had brownouts
so
too.
that's the kind of you've got to be really careful about the unintended consequences of some of the regulations when you make those, and it's not clear that the EPA has always done that.
Now, you could argue that the Title IX rollback is part of this discussion as well. We see Betsy DeVos sort of pushing back the Department of Ed on Title IX regulations, especially as it relates to due process and sexual harassment. Let's see, Mark, you want to start out? What were the issues with Title IX application that we're seeing pushed back against a little bit? Let's start there.
There were two really important parts. One was to prove sexual harassment or some other violation of Title IX, which went way beyond its statutory limits, by the way, in interpreting these things. To start with, that was one issue. The other issue was they only had to prove these by a preponderance of the evidence. And these were often criminal type cases, which ordinarily would have required a beyond a reasonable doubt standard. Now it's easier to convict someone at the level of the university. And that's
I was going to say, you said a criminal type case. You're talking about any university, a semi-judicial procedure taking place with a student who's been accused of something.
Right, but not
so
a real
saying
court of law.
different standard of evidence was used.
Right.
Than would be allowed in criminal court.
Right. Furthermore, there was very little due process. You couldn't call your own witnesses. You couldn't confront your accuser. Various obstacles that were placed in the way of the person who's accused to receive the same kinds of rights that an accused person would receive in a regular criminal trial court.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Mark, when you say preponderance, I was reading one thing that said, think of it as being 51%.
Yeah, kind of.
Just about kind of a tipping balance.
Yeah.
In a formal court of law, what would be expected, what level of evidence would be expected with this type of accusation?
And if it's a criminal accusation, or like a criminal accusation, same thing as it would be in a court, it would be beyond a reasonable doubt.
Which would mean,
and a conviction
can you express that in a percent?
Well, you know, close to certainty. Not exactly,
think
but
of
close.
Think of it like a confidence interval. I think statistically, think of it like a 95% level. I mean, think of it sort of in those.
Like an alpha level.
Yeah, I mean, think of it. I think it's similar to that. I think that's at least the right conception.
And more than that, you had to have a unanimous jury, right?
Yeah, right.
Which is even tougher standard.
Yeah.
None of that's required, or has been required. So.
Now, does this mean, and again, I'll go ahead and play what the general argument would be, does this mean Republicans don't care about women, don't care about sexual crimes, don't care about any of those things? Because that's going to be the portrayal that some people will try to spin on this, that Betsy DeVos is really just a woman hater, for lack of a better term, which seems kind of ironic, people say, but how do people answer that charge? Anybody?
I could answer that. I mean, look, you're giving everyone the same rights they ought to have under our concept of the rule of law, however difficult that is to define, but under our concept of the rule of law. Everybody should be treated equally in equal circumstances, right? We haven't been doing that with people that have been accused in universities. And we've allowed universities to conduct their own independent, as it were, trial courts, kangaroo courts, more or less.
Yeah.
In my opinion, we probably should take them completely out of the universities. Make them go to the criminal courts.
Yeah, that's probably right.
We'll see about that.
You know, Solomon in the Bible talks about the first person to speak. Sounds pretty good until the second person has their case. The lack of due process means the second person is never heard.
That's right.
And so that's where you have to be very careful about that.
Yeah, I agree. Bert, anything to add?
Probably not a lot. I know that I don't know about the magnitude of the problems that Obama's letter directive caused, but certainly there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of individuals being mistreated because of lack of due process, and sometimes this can absolutely ruin someone's career if they get nailed for something of this nature that's so offensive.
Yeah, and from what I know, whenever these have gone into the court system, the people who've been accused have been exonerated for the most part.
Almost always.
So, and that's good. I think that's the legal trend.
Or let's not say exonerated, but not found guilty.
Not found guilty, right, because the evidence wasn't sufficient.
If you put it like that, though, again, the more left-leaning people are not going to like this at all.
But they're the very people who want rights for everyone. So it's an irony. They don't want rights in this case.
But let's push it on this just a little bit. You could argue that there is a real problem of sexuality on campuses and sexual misconduct, sexual misbehavior.
Oh, absolutely.
There is.
You know, universities across the country are struggling with mass drinking, mass drug use. So in some ways, there's an issue here. I guess the question is, how do you address it?
Well,
liberals might argue that this was the better way to address it. Do we have an alternative where we try to at least help deal with the problem and not just sort of
You can't address it
complain
until
about
you've
the
addressed what
symptoms?
the moral
cause.
issue. Until you address the moral foundations of the problem. You can't address it. And furthermore, if you try to address it at the legal level, you're going to find that most of these kinds of moral problems are consensual. Both parties are involved in this immoral behavior, right? So, we're just trying to pick out a few people out of this and prosecute them under these university systems, and we're finding it's very difficult or impossible to do it right.
Well, what we're chipping around and talking about here again is attempting to regulate individuals' choices externally, which you can to some extent through setting up incentive structures to help people to choose. But in this kind of an issue, we're talking about something that until the individual people start pulling back, we are going to continue to have problems with this. There will be misunderstandings, or if it's not a misunderstanding, there'll be people just simply striking out at someone else. And if we give them a venue to do that and encourage it, it's problematic. But this is still going to boil down to the individual person needs to choose how to live their lives. And if people do not want to live their lives in a way that's chaste, this kind of issue is going to be there. Oh yeah. We may be able to affect it in some ways by policy, but not change it the way we'd like to see.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I'm not even sure universities want to do that at all.
Yeah.
They don't want
If
to.
they can deal with it through this sort of quasi-judicial way, that's the easiest way for them to handle it, as opposed to getting to really the root of the problem, which is much more difficult.
Any university has an actual criminal activity going on, it needs to go before the actual court.
Yeah.
These are adult people by and large, and if they perform criminal activity, they should not be able to go before a university's quasi-court.
Student
Yeah.
panel,
I like
whatever,
that.
It's interesting. The classic example of this is the problem with drinking too much, drunkenness on campuses.
Yeah.
On the one hand, universities are coming out with all sorts of literature and programs and all sorts of things that are trying to get the students not to drink less. On the other hand, they will do nothing to actually prohibit it.
No, they want to appear to be doing something, which is in their interest, but to actually solve the problem, that's, All right, we're really out of time here. Let's do a couple of quick questions. If you can give me an answer, a sentence or less, let's say. I'll spring these on you guys. Do you think that Obamacare will actually be repealed? Mark?
No.
No? Jeff?
Modified.
Modified. Jeff?
No.
No? Bert?
March to single payer.
So you think that's the direction we're going? It's more toward what Sanders is arguing for?
I do think so.
My guess is you're probably right. Yeah, I think you're probably right. All right, next question. Do you think Donald Trump finishes his term of office?
Yes.
Mark?
First term, you mean, or two?
Let's assume first term. Okay, Mark, you say yes? Jeff?
Yes.
Bert?
Yes, unless something else happens. Nothing's going to come out of Russia, I think, or it already would be there. So unless he does something else, which certainly is within the realm of possibility, I do not see any impeachable offense now.
Yeah, at one point people thought he might resign because it was so difficult. That doesn't strike me as the kind of person he is. I think he would see that as a real dramatic personal failure, and I'm not sure he wants to go down like that. But
Bad tweets.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, that'll do it for this week. We will be back next week with another episode with a podcast with this as well. And so thank you for joining us, and we will see you in the future.